Hello guys, my name is Kim and welcome to this new video in which I'll talk about the best money makers in a game. As some of you might have noticed, I made a similar video to this one half of a year ago. However, that one is getting heavily outdated since Wargaming nerfed some already useless tanks, buffed some already powerful tanks, and most primarily added some new Russian premium heavy tanks. Cause that's what we all wanted after all, yay! I'm starting to get that kind of feeling that Wargaming likes money. And heavies. And Russians. Well, we wouldn't. Anyways, in my previous video, a lot of you did not know or understand how do I rank these tanks, so I rank them in 4 categories. First, my personal enjoyment. The more I like playing the tank, the more I like the replays of it, the higher is the chance of it being on the list. Second, how cheap is the tank? If the tank has a very low ammunition or repair cost, or both obviously, it has a better chance of appearing on a list. And if a tank is under 198 penetration, so the penetration you need to penetrate this piece of shit frontally, I'll instantly double the ammunition cost because you will have to fire a lot of premium shots with that kind of a tank in order to feel at least kinda useful. Third, how powerful is the tank? No matter how cheap is the tank, if it's weak it won't earn anything. As well, to be considered strong, the tank must excel or, well, at least be kind of good in at least 2 different quote-unquote strength categories. It may be either the mobility, firepower, survivability, or extras, so for example camo. And lastly, fourth, the average net gain per game, or in other words, the amount of money that a certain tank gets worldwide, on average per game and or minute. Either way, with that out of the way, we can get into the list, starting off with the number 5, which is occupied by the almighty Leve. Now this tank is no racer with barely above 10 horsepower to ton ratio, despite the fact that, well, it has the name Leve, literally meaning lion. And as you might know, lion is a cat, and cats are agile. So it's either a bit of wrong name that was created before the tank itself, or a lion that looks probably like this. Either way, the slow speed automatically means higher armor. Of course, there are some exceptions, but Leve most certainly is not one of them. This tank is in fact one of the most heavily armored tier 8 tanks, especially since it was buffed. The only downside of having such a high armor is that it looks like a milk box with a bowl on top of it. You can't see the Leve in it yet? Well, what about now? Either way, the frontal armor of this tank is 150mm at the upper plate and 120mm at the lower plate, which without angling would be enough to block majority of the tier 6 guns and some tier 7 guns. However, it is as well very well angled. So in order to pen the upper plate, you need to have between 210 and 225mm of armor penetration, which by itself would be already kinda rare to have. This alone is quite insane, and I'm not yet talking about when somebody decides to angle it, because if somebody does so, the armor can get even above 250mm, and the only weak spot will still remain the lower plate, which sadly remains only 160mm thick. Other than that, the whole armor is shaped like a typical German tank, which gives you the feeling of control over the armor, and similarly to feeling you get from missing with an accurate gun, getting penned with this armor feels as if it was purely your misplay and not just somebody double tapping the 2 key to make himself look more purple. The third armor is also very thick, however compared to the hull it's rather round and very well angled. As well, the turret received an HD update a while ago, meaning that you can't pen it frontally by just shooting right next to the gun mantlet. But sadly it's not entirely impenetrable as it has plenty of tiny spaces where if you will get lucky you will pen it with ease. Next up, if it comes to the gun, it has kind of average alpha, bad DPM, but an amazing penetration, with which it feels almost as if you were playing a TD. Penetration. And lastly, the concealment, which is, well. Another thing on this list is gonna be the winner of my previous list, the T-34. On my previous list, I kinda did not count in the fact that it was kinda boring to play because of its gun's ridiculously long reload. I just looked at the fact that at the time it had the largest average net income out of all the tanks in the game. But yeah, this is the new list, so I simply decided to refuse to put it onto number 1, despite the fact that it clearly makes the largest amount of money. Now, this tank is again all about that gun, which has the highest penetration out of all tier 8 non-TD tanks. And in fact, you have got plenty of alpha as well, 400 to be exact. However, the reload. You can go to the nearest Tesco, buy some chips and play like a damn arty, because all you have to do is shoot somebody, retreat, and wait for that hour-long reload. It seriously reloads itself almost as long as some of the autoloaders, and that is already something to say. But yeah, its awesome penetration makes premium shots a complete waste for this tank, since the base pen that you get from your regular AP rounds is comparable to the tier 10 tanks. This as well means that the tank literally prints money. The armor is as well rather decent, not the greatest, but rather decent indeed. Now, as you might know, the T-34 is pretty much the same design as the T-29, but have only a different gun. And that means that it got an insane turret armor as well as the T-29. That is impenetrable even for most tier 10s. Well, obviously apart from this little thing on top of it, but let's be real here, who is going to hit it? The whole armor sadly not all that good, but honestly, we would be asking for a bit too much here, and lastly, its mobility is as well rather decent, at least if you exclude the hidden numbers. You've got a horsepower to ton ratio nearing 12.5, which is truly amazing for a heavy tank with such a big ass gun. But your ground resistances are absolute crap, especially on soft terrain where you are more or less like a sitting duck for enemies. All in all, this tank is the best moneymaker out there, theoretically. But I wouldn't recommend it to anyone for two reasons. First, it's one of the most expensive tanks out there. And second, it's really boring to play. Trust me, you won't play more than 100 games in it unless you really have to. And if you have to do something, then it's not a game. It's called homework. The third thing on this list is gonna be this annoying piece of fucking shit French fucking medium tank, the MX CDC. Now, this tank is not here because of its armor, as you know, there are two tanks that I've shown up till now. In fact, its armor is so thin that if somebody decided to fart a bit too harshly, it would break the transmission. No, this tank is on this list because of its ludicrously fast speed. Seriously, this tank is the fastest high tier tank in the entire game. Well, at least until the new light tanks arrive, but I must point out that it's the fastest high tier tank. Because on the lower tiers you get things like this one with horsepower to ton ratio nearing 60. By the way, were they always this fast? I seriously do not remember them being as fast as they are today, like Jesus. This is fast even for the new light tanks. But now back to the CDC. Thanks to this speed, you can easily control the range of engagements and thus change some nasty situations into more favorable ones. The enemies are closing onto you, and if you fire, you will surely get spotted. Well, a normal medium would possibly shit his pants in this situation, and if not, he would have to pull 50 meters behind a bush so when he fires he won't get spotted. But you, as an MX-CDC, can do this with the enemy spotting distance. Spot them, go out of their spotting distance and fire, then go bang, spot them again and repeat. Obviously this won't literally work, but you get the point. This tank is simply ridiculously fast. The gun on this tank is actually kinda nice. It has 240 alpha damage with a pretty decent reload, thanks to which it is a bit above the average DPM of 2050. However, I feel as if the gun did not have that kind of oomph into it as the other mediums do. Like, it is overall above the average stats, especially when it comes to the damage and penetration. But seriously, it doesn't feel like it. When I fire at the enemy with this gun, it feels as if I threw a stick at them and waited for them to do something with it, like, I don't know, stab them or something. But yeah, the stats are great. Average alpha of 240, great penetration of 212, and great accuracy of 0.33. And overall, it is great on paper, but as I said, I just don't feel as if I was doing as much damage as with the other mediums, despite the fact that I clearly do. So if you looked at some replays and you like the gun, you can definitely buy the tank. It's really fast, and apart from the gun, it's really fun to play, especially if there's no one to steal or kill. So, you know, platoon. The second thing on this list is gonna be the ravioli, mamma mia. Sorry, I just had to. Either way, this tank is here only thanks to its quite recent buff, because before it, I did not even recognize it as a tank. That's how weak it was. But today, oh boy, it is constantly amongst the top tanks if it comes to the tank income. And the best thing about it is the cheapest tier 8 tank in the game, costing only 7,200 gold. This is like 20 bucks. The only tank as cheap as this is the Super Pershing, which is, well, simply we got the possibility always buy the ravioli. Well, this tank might be counted as a medium, which would normally indicate that the tank has a plenty of mobility while still keeping some armor. But this tank has got none of those. It's probably faster than heavy since it was buffed, but the speed is still amongst the slowest mediums. Well, not that much, it can still move, you know. And the armor is only about enough to block potatoes, otherwise everything goes through, with the only exception being the gunmantlet. So yeah, the tank is already crap in 2 categories, and that's theoretically weak, no? Well, the thing is that it is more of a tank destroyer than a medium. It is a humongous gun with 390 alpha damage, but that's not all. It as well has a turret which alone would be kind of a privilege for a TD to have. But on top of all of it, it is both turret and track traverse speed of a medium. So you simply cannot be circled out. In other words, it's a TD that has a plenty of mobility, at least compared to the other TDs, and you won't even be tilted by some lighty running circles around you. Seriously, that is like the most annoying and embarrassing way to die. But despite the fact that this thing is pretty OP, good alpha, great accuracy, mad penetration, and decent accuracy, it shares one problem with artilleries, and that is that once its team dies, it will surely die as well, since its armor and speed are somewhat especially awesome. And now today, in my opinion, best moneymaker in the game. A lot of you possibly already guessed it correctly. It's the FB215B. Just kidding. But really, how the fuck can it be considered a tank with the highest minute income in the game? It's a heavy, the most expensive class to play. It's a tier 10, the most expensive tier to play. And lastly, it's not a premium, like what the fuck we be adding. This, by the way, one of the reasons I'm making this list. On some random average measuring sites, you might find completely incorrect info which you will follow, but guess what? After about a week, they'll fix their shit and you'll be left there wondering about what has just happened. Because you might have just lost 30 euros to just some page bug. Now really, now to the actual number 1 tank, which is obviously the Patriot. And salty crybaby warning, I freaking hate this tank. Not because it's weak and unusable, but because it is way too powerful. But enough talking around, let's get into its armor. As you might see, the turret is impenetrable frontally unless you get really lucky and you hit some of these tiny parts. So, well, kinda similar to the Lilith. The whole armor is about 200mm thick with the possibility of being angled. And if somebody does so, the upper part goes to about 230mm, while the lower part will go to about 200mm. So overall, quite powerful indeed. Its gun has 240 alpha damage, which is really low for a heavy tank. However, it has a great DPM of 2085 to go with it, which makes it already kind of useful. But that's not all. The gun gets a decent accuracy and great penetration as well, which means that you won't have to fire any premium shots at all, making your income that much higher. And lastly, it has a mobility nearly as high as the average medium, so you are pretty much the old E5 but on tier 8. Now this is gonna be the end of this list, but I wanna show you some honorable mentions as well, which are gonna be the Defender for being ridiculously OP, Scorpion G for being ridiculously OP, and the Liberté, fuck it, I can pronounce it alright, for being again, ridiculously OP. Now, I haven't included these tanks for the same exact reason, which is my kind of unwritten rule, and that is the limit of 1 tank per list that is not currently available in a shop. And the Patriot just happened to have the highest win rate and net income, so yeah. Anyways, it's gonna be the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, give it a like. If you did not, please give it a dislike because I wanna know whether or not I should improve. If you already gave it a dislike, please comment down below about what you dislike about the video so I can change it in the future. If you really like the video, please subscribe to my channel. Trust me, I'll appreciate it by a lot. Holy freaking shit, what the fuck is that?